Armenia has been selected to host the 17th meeting
Turkey and Azerbaijan is going to be a game changer. And it will bring Europe
of Strategy and Development of the Applied Policy Research Institute of Armenia. I kindly invite her to take a seat on the floor and we'll commence our discussion. Thank you.
I invite the panelists to join me on the stage, please. Please. Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to this high-level panel at the Yerevan Dialogue 2025 on the South Caucasus as a strategic hub, challenges and opportunities for trade and connectivity. My name is Anahit Pilibosyan, and I am the Vice President of Strategy and Development at Armenia, a Yerevan-based independent think tank. Recent developments, including short-term and long-term geoeconomic and geopolitical shifts, are reinforcing the South Caucasus's potential as a bridge and a vital hub linking Europe and Asia. According to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the region transported 1 million tons of cargo traffic in 2023, an increase of 65% from 2022, and with a potential for a lot more. But obstacles are preventing it, such as unpredictable journey delays and poor digital and transport infrastructure. This is why we are here today. We have the pleasure of having distinguished speakers to talk about both the promises and the challenges for transit and connectivity in the South Caucasus. Armen Grigorian, Secretary of the Security Council of Armenia, Ambassador Lazar Comenescu, Secretary General, Permanent International Secretariat of the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation, Dr. Saeed Khadibzadeh, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Head of the Institute for Political and International Studies of Iran, Joshua Kuchera, Senior South Caucasus Analyst at the International Crisis Group, and Eleonora Tafuro-Ambrosetti, Senior Research Fellow at the Russia, Caucasus, and Central Asia Center at the Italian Institute for International Political Studies, ISPI. We will have 2 rounds of questions before opening to Q&A if we have the time. I will start now my questions, starting with Secretary Grigorian. The Crossroads of Peace encapsulates the Armenian government's vision for connectivity in the region. We heard the Prime Minister speak about it, but perhaps you can elaborate a bit more and also explain how it fits in the wider connectivity projects such as the International North-South Transport Corridor and the Middle Corridor.
Thank you, Anaidi, and I would like to join all the welcome words to Yerevan Dialogue, and it's a great honor to be here and to speak to this audience. In reality, the Peace Crossroad is an economic project that has an aim to unblock the region, create interconnectivity in the region, increase interdependency, and strengthen peace and stability in the region. And the government of Armenia came up with this proposal to the regional countries and also to the global community, I mean the other countries, to be engaged in this process, which has a great chance to bring prosperity, first of all, prosperity and also stability. We have a strong belief that peace process has many components, and one of the components is economic interrelation between the regional countries, but also, as I mentioned, the project Peace Crossroad gives opportunity to other countries also to be engaged in the process, to gain from the process. For us, it's very much important that the unblocking should happen based on the sovereignty and jurisdiction of the regional countries. And that's very much important also in the context of the peace. We also consider very much important equality while unblocking the region, and reciprocity, because that are the major principles that will create opportunities for all, but not for unique ones. And with Peace Crossroad project, we try to create interconnectivity, work with regional countries, create interdependency, and strengthen dialogue. Right now, Armenia is implementing many projects which is part of Peace Crossroad, North-South Highway, which is a project that's very much important in interconnection, but also develops Armenian infrastructure. The government of Armenia for the last few years also intensively investing in the infrastructures of Armenia, bringing to the level that will have an opportunity, those infrastructure, to be interconnected to regional infrastructures. And we invite regional countries and global community to be engaged in the process and gain from the process and invest in peace of the region. Thank you.
Secretary Comenescu, the organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation is a unique entity bringing together countries of the wider Black Sea region, including Armenia and Turkey, which do not have diplomatic representation otherwise. As our region, the South Caucasus, navigates the turmoil of geopolitics and geoeconomics, how do you see the role of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation in facilitating transit routes within the South Caucasus?
Thank you very much. And but before trying to answer to your justified and well-placed question, allow me a couple of remarks of a rather more general nature, but which on issues which, in my opinion, have a lot to do with the relevance of the Black Sea area and the South Caucasus. My second remark is that, but before that, also allow me to say that I'm particularly glad to be back in Yerevan at this second edition of the Yerevan Dialogue. I had the honor to be in the previous one as well. And I have to say that though this forum is a young one, looking at the level of participants, the panelists, speakers, and the topics chosen for the debate, it clearly shows that the Yerevan Dialogue has already won a top place among events of this kind. And for that, I would like to congratulate our hosts, the Armenian government, for organizing this dialogue. So the two general remarks which I wanted to make are the following. I think that you'll agree with me that the last years we've been witnessing a lot of debate about deglobalization, decoupling, de-risking, how to diminish dependencies, how to build resilience based upon less dependency. Well, in my opinion, this is something which goes counter to the real developments into global developments, because we wanted to know globalization will continue. And it's important to be aware of the fact that this globalization is taking place, is continuing under a new paradigm, especially the one generated by the digitalization revolution. But when talking about, so interdependencies will continue, and I would even say will grow. And this is why, in my opinion, I will repeat something which I have already said last year. Rather than speaking about how to build resilience individually, perhaps it's much more important to look into how to build resilient interdependencies. And that brings us to connectivity, which is the key for that. And you may agree with me that looking at the map of the world, this region, the Black Sea wide region and the Caucasus are key in the development of any serious connectivities which are taking into account the global trends in the economic world. And by the way, and this is the second remark of mine, when we look into the map of the world, we see where the engines of growth are. And that brings us to the awareness about the importance of enhanced connectivity between Europe and Asia. And again, you cannot imagine developing any alternative or any project or initiative related to connectivity without taking into account the Caucasus, the Black Sea, the wider Black Sea region, and the Caucasus as a whole. So these are the, now trying to come back to your question about what about the organization which I have the honor to represent is doing here. Well, this organization, which was set up 33 years ago, was set up exactly by the founding member states, 11 they were, now we are 13, in order, as a platform for cooperation, for identifying together ways and means to develop economy now in this region, but also to connect with the other regions. And this is what the BSEC has been trying to do. I will not elaborate that much on that, simply to say that during the years, several initiatives aimed at strengthening the connectivity inside the region, but also beyond that, have been taken in the organization. Let me mention, for example, the famous Black Sea Ring Highway, or the motorways of the sea, and very importantly, in the very practical terms, which proves that how important it is to concentrate our activities on the project-oriented type of actions. We've been in the organization setting up the so-called BSEC permit system, which is aimed at facilitating the crossing of the border of trucks of goods. And during the COVID period and after that, this BSEC permit system greatly facilitated crossing the difficulties which within our region, like others, have been confronted with during this period. And I'm glad to say that there are prospects now. 9 of the members of the 13 member states of the EU, of the BSEC, are already. I will conclude by saying that in this particular project, Armenia has been very, very active. And I would like to take this opportunity to give my appreciation for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Dr. Khatibzadeh, Iran is involved very much in the geoeconomics of our region. Iran offers to establish the Persian Gulf Black Sea corridor connecting South and Southeast Asia with Europe via Iran, Armenia, Georgia, and the Black Sea. There is also the western segment of the international North-South transport corridor running through the South Caucasus and Azerbaijan in particular, with Resht Ashtara being the only missing railway link. And finally, just last month in May, the free trade agreement between Iran and the Eurasian Economic Union entered into force. So how does Iran view the transit potential of the South Caucasus?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me this very opportunity to be here. And also I would like to thank organizers of Yerevan Dialogue 2025 for inviting us and also giving us this very opportunity to be in your very beautiful city in such a pleasant weather. Talking about South Caucasus, we have to take into consideration different issues, including the ones that you said. Everybody knows who are attending here that the map of this region indicate to what extent integration in this region, sub-region, South Caucasus, can help us to have a better connectivity and a strategic connection between countries of this region. For Iran, for many reasons, through the millennia, this region has been very important. Those who are aware of the history of this region, they know that for many millennia, Iran has benefited from two main corridors, east-west corridors that later on they labeled it as Silk Road corridor, from eastern border of Iran to the western border of Iran, of course, with two sub-roads, that one goes to Baghdad of those days and one goes to Anatolia and also this South Caucasus of those days. And also another one which is now they call it Spice Road. It's a very ancient also north-south corridor of old days, coming from India to Bandar Abbas and through Iran to Central Asia and Russia. So in this very broader map of connectivity in this region, everybody understands that Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and the whole region of South Caucasus are very vital and important. The initiatives that you mentioned, including the Persian Gulf Black Sea connectivity, and this corridor also is connecting to the two main region through Iran and Armenia to all the way through Black Sea. Maybe later on we can elaborate a little bit on this, but it shows that at the same time, while there are great potentialities and possibilities, at the same time the main question is that why we have not been able yet to materialize all the potentials that we see. This is where that we have to look a little bit on this geostrategic map of the region, and we have to be very careful that up until now there has been geostrategic competition and rivalry in this region that has avoided for the full materialization of the potentials of this region. The history tells us that any extra-regional geopolitical competition in this region is not for the good of the region. So all the countries in the region and in the neighboring area, they have to decide on one very important issue, that extra-regional geopolitical or big power geopolitical competitions, whoever they are, with any intention that they might have, the sacrifice will be the whole region. The second is geopolitical competition inside the region. This morning, Prime Minister of Armenia discussed about the previous routes and time to revive them. I think it indicates to what extent this rivalry inside the region has also avoided this broader cooperation in this region. This is why that Iran has always vocally has said that any geopolitical changes in this region through any initiative is not acceptable. So any connectivity and any connection in this region should ensure that there is no geopolitical changes in the map of the region, being actual corridors or these sort of initiatives that we are hearing. And I would like to second what Mr. Grigorian said about the sovereignty and about the importance of anything being in the realm of international law. So I stop here, and probably I can elaborate later on if there are other questions as well.
Let's turn to you, Joshua, now. You have been following the region for some time, and as the South Caucasus grapples with multiple geopolitical and unprecedented developments, and by that I mean the Russia-Ukraine war, the tensions in the Middle East, and shifting dynamics in the Euro-Atlantic relations. So considering all this, how do you see the prospects of the region becoming this coveted transit hub via east, west, and north and south?
Thank you, Anahit, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. Well, to state the extremely obvious, for the South Caucasus to become a viable transit hub, there needs to be peace. In particular, for the east-west variant of the middle corridor. Without peace, there's not going to be open borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan, between Armenia and Turkey. There's not going to be outside investment in the infrastructure that's going to be required for this region to become a viable transportation hub. But the flip side of that is that the prospect of the Caucasus becoming this hub of transport can help encourage the signature of the peace agreement. This vision of the Caucasus becoming integrated into the bigger world, not just in terms of infrastructure and trade, but in a broader political sense, can be an incentive to put the conflicts of the past behind and work towards a more cooperative future. Another political question that is standing over this is the relationship now between Georgia and the European Union. I'm sure, as you're all aware, the situation is not very good with relations right now. If this continues or continues to get worse, it's going to be more difficult for the EU to work to bring Georgia into this vision. That in turn will make Georgia less attractive for China, for example, to make the investments that it wants to make. And so this uncertainty is increasing the attractiveness of the Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan part of this east-west route, but it's putting some questions and making it more difficult to implement the larger project. Beyond politics, there are just some technical reasons that are going to make it difficult for this region to become a regional transport hub. There's bureaucratic hurdles. When you look at the middle corridor between Europe and Asia, you have to go through all of these countries of the Caucasus and Central Asia, crossing many borders that don't have integrated border control, customs, and so on. And this is a big bureaucratic hurdle for this route that has yet to be really addressed. There's a sea crossing. You have to cross the Caspian Sea to use this route. There's one port on this side of the Caspian, that's at Baku, which has relatively limited capacity. And then you have other geographical barriers like mountains in Georgia and the Caucasus in general. The northern route through Russia does not have any of these obstacles. As long as the war in Ukraine has been going on, there's been an incentive especially for outside actors to try to improve the conditions of the middle corridor. But with the prospect of that war ending, and to the extent that Russia is brought back into the world economy, there's going to be much less incentive for outside actors to make the investments into this middle corridor that could make the Caucasus a viable transit hub. And this is only going to increase the necessity for local actors, regional actors, actors inside the region to work on this.
Eleonora, let's talk about the Middle Corridor a bit more. It's one of the most discussed transit projects in recent years. Many speak about its potential to connect China with Europe, but there are also doubts about the viability of this project because of the logistical and legal complications, and the growing rivalry with China may add to the complexity as well. So, from a European perspective, how do you see the prospects of the Middle Corridor?
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you all for being here. I think Joshua already touched on very significant hurdles, but one thing should be clear from the European perspective. Of course, geopolitical necessities and the need to bypass Russia are definitely an incentive to go on with this middle corridor and make it more attractive, but it's also a matter of efficiency. The middle corridor is far shorter than the northern corridor, so I think the number of days that the cargo takes to arrive to Europe is basically half compared to the other route. So there is a lot of hype, and if you look at data, actually, you see that the increase in 2024 of cargo volume was like 60%, over 60% higher compared to the previous year. So of course, the incentives to invest on this route from the European perspectives are many, and from the South Caucasus and Central Asian perspective, but also from the Turkish perspective, this is a very worthy project because it increases also the geostrategic position of these regions. But of course, it is essential to manage expectations because of the challenges that we were talking about. It's not just geographical barriers, it's also climate-related threats, and this is valid especially in Central Asia, but I think in the South Caucasus, this is an important factor to take into account. The bureaucratic challenges and the hurdles in harmonizing the bureaucracy and the tax system among the states, of course, geopolitical volatility, and also from the European perspective, I think there is a fear that Russia will be able to co-opt this route. Of course, this is more in the general framework of the geopolitical confrontation between Russia and the EU, and of course in the framework of sanctions. Then there is one thing that I think worries Brussels quite a lot, is the very dynamics of the traffic, which is mainly from east to west. So for the European Union, this route is already more expensive than the other available routes. So if trucks then go back from Europe to the east empty, because of course the cargo volume is not as high as it is from east to west, then it adds up to the reasons why the middle corridor is deemed too expensive. And then, of course, the important thing from the Europeans' perspective is, again, to manage expectations and to imagine this middle corridor as developing in the future. Of course, the trend is clear. Europe is now committed to developing this middle corridor. It made it clear also in the first EU Central Asia summit just a few weeks ago, but at the same time, it's impossible realistically to think that the middle corridor will at some point substitute the northern corridor or become the main trade route. This is still not feasible in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Eleonora. Secretary Grigorian, you elaborated on the opportunities arising from regional connectivity, and they are compelling, but we also must address the challenges with the ongoing tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The very base to complete mega infrastructure projects such as the Middle Corridor or the International North-South Transport Corridor or the Crossroads of Peace, is of course geopolitical stability. So what can be done by all parties, and I mean the involved countries, the cooperating countries, investors and others, to address these challenges?
Thank you very much for the question. Just to continue where Madame Eleonora stopped, for example, Peace Crossroad, it's not only about global trade, but it's also about regional trade. I mean, we usually, when we try to discuss it, there's more global concentration. We try to see it from global perspective. That's very much important. But there is another very, very important aspect of that. It's regional trade and regional interdependency and strengthening cooperation in the region. And by the way, if we unleash the opportunity of the region, maybe it will also increase the cost of transportation. I'm sure if there is an economic assessment, then there can be factors or findings that will show that stronger regional cooperation and trade will create more opportunity and may also decrease the price and will create more opportunity. It's obvious that in the regional context, it will create also interdependency, and it's also about inclusion. I would like to mention that this project is about inclusion, not exclusion, and we see everyone participating in this project in the region, but also giving chance to other global actors to be engaged in the project. And Peace Crossroad should be also seen as I mentioned, part of the peace process. I know usually the thinking of peace is like it's an event, but in reality it's not an event, it's a process. If we think from process perspective, it becomes very much obvious that there are events that as in famous song it's said, would be another brick to the wall. I know nowadays sometimes wall has a negative connotation, but I'm very much on positive perspective of the wall. I mean, these events like unblocking, signing the peace agreement would be another bricks to the wall of building peace. And if we think peace as a process, it will become more easy, even in our mind, to resolve existing process and trying to move forward on establishing peace in the region.
Secretary General Comenescu, the Black Sea region has been the theater of geopolitical rivalries and commercial tensions. The efforts to stop the war in Ukraine have intensified, and stakeholders must start thinking about the future possible configurations of connectivity in the Black Sea. So is this something that the Black Sea Economic Cooperation is thinking about? And if so, how does it envision it?
Definitely the answer to your question would be yes. As you referred to the unfortunately still present conflict in our region, I hope that peace would come rather sooner than late, and I think that efforts should be, strengthened towards reaching this objective at the level of the international community, and that would definitely allow us to resume in full the cooperation in the Black Sea area. Now, coming to the various aspects which were touched upon by my colleagues in the panel, and with the hope, as I said, of the war being ended, I think that there are, and this is where we are trying to work and bring our contribution as an organization. There are some, let's say, priority lines of action, in my opinion, in this respect. First of all, and by referring particularly to the connectivity, I think that first we should look what has so far been achieved and still is not fully achieved, and to build upon that. There are, I mentioned in my previous intervention, several projects, initiatives launched inside the Black Sea area, the Black Sea Economic Organization, and there have been important steps therein. Now the important thing is now to build upon, and by the way, I would like to say that, well, there are, my second idea is that it is extremely important in whatever initiative and action by locally, I mean, in the region, but also with the involvement of outside actors. It's important to take into account primarily initiatives coming from inside the region. And here, initiatives like, for example, the Crossroad for Peace, which was referred to by the distinguished Prime Minister of Armenia. This is one of these initiatives which deserve to be paid appropriate attention. Of course, these type of initiatives have to get let's say, through negotiations to be endorsed by all the actors so as to make of it a successful undertaking. Third line of action, which it seems to me to be extremely important, I refer to the fact that besides the countries in the BISEC organization, there are also other actors who are paying attention to this region, and actors, be it international organizations or countries, and there is a need, an extremely important aspect, there is a need of better correlation and coordination when promoting initiatives, like, for example, the Middle Corridor. I was last week in Leipzig for the International Transport Forum, and there one particular important idea has been stressed upon, and this is my fourth remark. All these initiatives aimed at enhancing connectivity have to be developed in a context of mutually reinforcing rather than alternatives or competing each other. That's a very important point which has to be taken into account. My fifth remark, I very much welcome the fact that the European Union has proved increasing attention towards this region, be it the Black Sea area or the Middle Corridor. Here, and I understand if my information is correct, the European Union is now about to come up with the revised or a new strategic approach towards the Black Sea region. And here there is one point which I want to stress, which seems to me to be extremely important for the benefit of the region and also for the benefit of the, let's say, cooperation between the European Union and this part of the world and the organizations therein, primarily the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization. There is need of, first of all, taking into account appropriately of the realities on the ground and, how to say, developing, let's say, country-tailored approach in accordance with the need of each of the countries inside this region. And second, there is a need of synergies between what the European Union is advancing or proposing and what has been done locally, including by this organization, by the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization. And finally, still on this aspect, I hope that this strategy, beyond dealing with the current situation, developments, perhaps containment approaches and so on, there has to be there has to include a forward-looking approach. We have to think about the day after tomorrow, how to act so as to create the prerequisites for, let's say, for further progress in economic prosperity in the region. And last but not least, in any kind of undertakings, endeavors in this respect, it's key to get the business communities, the private sector involved, not just in implementing specific decisions or initiatives, but in initiating them, in shaping such initiatives. Because at the end of the day, whatever initiative, albeit wonderful, you come to resources and to entrepreneurship. And this is why, for me, it's key to have the business community involved in all these type of initiatives. And that's what we are trying to do as in the organization which I have the honor to represent. Thank you very much.
Dr. Khatibzadeh, we first discussed the transit potential of the region as a whole, and I would like to turn to Armenia now. There are a number of elements to take into consideration. Iran opposes the creation of the extraterritorial Zangezur corridor via Armenia, which is a demand of Azerbaijan in the peace negotiations. And at the same time, there is actually the Aras corridor linking Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan via Iran, which is close to completion. And finally, Iranian companies are also involved in the infrastructure projects in southern Armenia. So how do you see, what role do you see for Armenia to foster trade and connectivity?
Let me now be clear that Iran is very much supporting diversification of connectivities and transportation routes and corridors. And we think that, more we can have this sort of connectivity, the better for our region. And this is why that Iran 100% supported this peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And we do believe that, the sooner you can wrap up this peace agreement is the better for not only Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also for the region. In the previous round of my talks, I said that the potentials of this region have never been materialized, and many of our initiatives and many of our projects have been the victim of this geopolitical rivalries and tensions. So peace is not just an option; it's a must. It's something that we all have to devote our energy and our resources for that. But nevertheless, it is also very important. I have to highlight it. I have to make it very clear that we do not accept any change in geostrategic landscape of the region. Let's call it Zangezur or anything else. We do support anything that Armenia and Azerbaijan agree among each other based on the international law and under the international norms, sovereignty and jurisdiction of Armenia, but it is very important to mention that nothing should change the landscape, the geostrategic landscape of this region. This is why that I really like the way that the crossroads, this pathway was formalized. I was sharing the same panel with His Excellency Mr. Grigorian, and I asked about this Zangezur, and I by intention raised that question because I wanted to hear from Armenia that no corridor can be actually change the logic of corridor, meaning cutting this connectivity in this region is not something that we can see for the future of our region. We think that we need connectivity, we don't need cut. We need communication, but we don't need rupture. And this is why that it should be inclusive, it should be competitive in terms of the economic logic of that, and this is very important. For Iran, Armenia is very important, and for decades it has been the case. This is why that Iran has always advocating the best relation between Iran and Armenia. There are many reasons for that: geoeconomic, geostrategic, geocultural aspects of our bilateral relations. But also, I have to raise and I have to bring this to your attention, that Iran and Armenia for Iran, is the only country in the Eurasian Trade Union that we have and we do share border with. So Armenia is not just for us 3 million market, that we do not look at Armenia as a market, but we think that it is a gateway to 200 million possible potential partners in this trade union. Also, Iran can provide and has always provided a pathway to Persian Gulf. You all know that Iran is the only country on earth that's connect Persian Gulf to the Caspian Sea, and Persian Gulf and Caspian Sea altogether almost cover 70% of all conventional gas and oil in the world. I mean the conventional energy resources of the world. And this connectivity means that we can provide a very economically wise, a very good route to be provided to all South Caucasus, including Armenia. So I would like to conclude this part with this notion that peace is what we actually need for our region. Iran is ready to use all its capacity to materialize this, and I think that now the logic is out there. Everybody knows that South Caucasus, through these initiatives, through these railroads, through these pathways, can have enough diversification of routes inside and outside. It can provide good potentials, and there is no need for initiatives that are being excluding stakeholders in this region. We have to work on these all-inclusive initiatives. Thank you.
All right, we have under 5 minutes left, so I will ask Joshua and Eleonora to respond briefly to the questions, starting with Joshua. Russia and Turkey pushed forward for the 3+3 format of regional cooperation to mean the 3 South Caucasus countries plus Iran, Turkey, and Russia. Some experts speak about the 1+1+1 format, so Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, as the first step towards creating a more cohesive regional structure. And there was actually a meeting at the Deputy Foreign Ministers level recently that embodied that idea, let's say. So, Joshua, how do you see the potential for more regular trilateral cooperation, and how can it affect connectivity and transit projects?
Yeah, so the South Caucasus today is, I think, one of the least integrated regions there are in the world. I think, you know, in the given amount of space, the number of closed borders here is really astounding. All legacies of the 90s. Not only the borders between Armenia and Turkey, but of course Georgia has these breakaway territories, Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The borders there are effectively closed, and that effectively closes off Georgia's good transportation ties with Russia, on which Armenia depends heavily. Now even Georgia, Azerbaijani border is closed for passengers anyway. So there has been a lot of disintegration on this bounds. Secondly, there's a lot of political, historical, cultural reasons why the countries of this region, the 3 countries of the South Caucasus, don't really think of themselves as part of a region. So there's a lot of obstacles to overcome here. I think you mentioned the 3+3. This is another issue where there's interest from 5 of these 6 parties, but Georgia doesn't want to be part of it because of Russia's involvement. But I think the 3+3 should be seen as at least an indication that there is more interest in a regional approach to these problems. The EU as well, I mean, I think they're maybe not as far along, but there are people in the EU who are advocating for a more regional approach rather than a bilateral approach to the Caucasus. So in this context, I think the meeting of the deputy foreign ministers that you mentioned is interesting. It's encouraging. They said it's a first step, and so let's see where it will lead.
Okay. Eleonora, let's end with the role of the EU in the South Caucasus. The EU has been very much involved recently, especially on security, but there is a lot more that can be done. Does the EU have any role in helping realize the transit potential of the South Caucasus, and under which principles do you think the EU's connectivity policy for the region should be pursued?
Yeah, it does have a role, but connectivity is a great example of the challenge facing the European Union. On the one hand, the EU must adopt this geopolitical thinking and acknowledge the political realities on the ground, so it has to be pragmatic. On the other hand, it has to uphold its principles and keep being this value-driven actor that is also a credible one. So, of course, this is easier said than done, and particularly in the South Caucasus, we've seen already some double standards that were evident in Brussels' foreign policy. In the connectivity domain, this could be done on the political level by the credible commitment of the EU in the peace process. Mr. Gregorian was talking about peace as a process, and I very much agree with it. And sometimes, you know, the EU kind of stepped down a bit from the mediation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but it can be very much present if the peace agreement is signed in the ensuring that the peace agreement is implemented. So I see a role there. I see a role in facilitating the normalization process between Armenia and Turkey. A lot of people say that the EU doesn't have leverage on Turkey anymore to push this normalization thing forward. I don't fully agree with it, but at the same time, the EU must, of course, put this item at the top of its agenda with Turkey. More concretely on connectivity, the EU should focus on anti-corruption projects and ensuring that the connectivity remains also a transparency project with a focus on SMEs. This is also something that the EU could do in concert with the European Bank for Reconstruction and other local partners, but investing on the SMEs and reducing their exposure to corruption is crucial. And lastly, the EU has to commit really to fostering environmental friendly connectivity projects, because as I was saying, climate-related threats are very much a thing in the South Caucasus, and the EU must really invest in climate-friendly projects. Thank you.
Well, that is the end of our panel. Thank you very much, esteemed speakers. It's been a most instructive debate. Please join me in thanking the panelists before we move to the next session.
future together.
To our moderator, Ms. Alita Kizekova, Major Lead for International Relations and lecturer at Curtin University, Australia. Alika, the floor is yours.
Bariol Bolorin, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Alita Kizekova, and my affiliation says that I come from Australia, where I teach at Curtin University, but I'm also originally from Slovakia, and I worked there at the ministry dealing with e-governance, and I work at the Czech Parliament before at the Speaker's office, so I'm quite familiar with member states' interactions with the European Union, but also the challenges of integration and different stages of democracy and democratic governance. So today, I have a distinguished panel of speakers who are a mix of local representation, but also European Union, European Parliament, but also member states. So let me introduce Arman Yerevanyan, who is the chair and standing committee on European integration at the National Assembly of Armenia. Then Belen Martinez Carbonell, who is the Secretary General of European External Action Service. Rasa Yuknevichiene, who comes from Lithuania but is a member of the European Parliament. Mark Kuls, who is the President of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities at the Council of Europe. Then we have Marko Štucin, who is the State Secretary for European Affairs and Economic Diplomacy, International Law, and the Protection of Interests from Slovenia. And then Lucian Fatu, who's President at Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center in Romania. So we have 2 rounds of questions. Each speaker will speak for about a minute or 2. And then we'll try to have a Q&A when I also would like to invite our young leaders to pose questions, so please prepare some questions. I'll dive right into the local perspectives on engagement. Obviously, today's topic is about the European neighborhood, a collaboration of countries in the region where European Union tries to engage on a political security level and make sure there is a resilience of democratic institutions and also balancing the security challenges. We've heard from previous panels some considerations to peace talks, but also we have ongoing war in Ukraine, which is one of the countries involved in these processes. And so, in my view, every partner country has their unique take on how the collaboration has evolved so far. So I'll ask our distinguished speaker from the National Assembly whether Mr. Yerevanyan can tell us about his perspective on the current partnership, what has been delivered so far, whether he feels the country gains some benefits, or whether he feels there are some challenges that have taken place and need to be looked at.
Thank you very much. If we talk about Eastern Partnership, and generally in that framework, if we talk about bilateral partnership between the EU and Eastern Partnership member states, I should note that Eastern Partnership initially was created as a geopolitical project. What I mean by saying this is that after the big enlargement of the EU, after the 10 new members became an EU member, so there were 6 countries left geographically, physically, in between the EU and Russia. And all of those 6 countries became a member of one project, irrespective of what these countries' desires were, what their internal structure was, democracies, not democratic, what their foreign policy choices were. So all of them were in one basket, and there was, in a way, a uniform approach towards these countries. And back then, it was more or less understandable because back then there were policies which would fit more or less to all these countries, and the rest could be addressed via bilateral cooperation. But now, as we see the world is changing and our region is changing, and each of our countries has changed the way that it will be very hard to find a uniform approach to all of us. And I would say that the normative power of European Union has reached its limits. So furthermore, if we want to go beyond this, I would suggest to concentrate on bilateral relations, via which we can also influence the reform agenda in each country and in the whole region as such, but what is more important, via bilateral relations, bilateral tools, and what is more important, via not only soft measures, but also hard, solid measures on the ground, be that economic ties, in certain cases, sanctions, why not? And only via these measures we can, in a way, bring back to a certain level of uniformity these 6 countries and our partnership with the EU. Thanks.
Thank you for your remarks. I'm going to direct my next question to Secretary General Martinez Carbonell. We had a suggestion here, obviously, to help with certain measures and actions that could involve sanctions. From your perspective, looking at what is at the EU's disposal, how can the EU, and has been taking maybe some measures on a more targeted way, contribute to reducing the risk of some geopolitical fragmentation and foster peace, stability in this region?
Thanks so much, Halika. Maybe I take it where Armand left it, with the invitation of how the bilateral relations can be further constructed. And I think Armenia is a very good example of a constructive relation between the EU and an important country in this region. And the way we are trying to promote this bilateral agenda, it's by something, you know, we work on the basis of documents, which is how bureaucracies like to set agendas. And we are now finalizing negotiations for what we will call a new partnership agenda with Armenia. And then it will, maybe to make it more tangible and comprehensive to the audience, I will make 3 examples of how this agenda is going to take forward our relations. The first, and this is a topic that both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister mentioned this morning, is connectivity, which I think is one of the issues of the day. And we want to see Armenia included in the discussions that we're having in the region on wider connectivity. And this includes the crossroads of peace, Armenian agenda. We have, some of you are familiar, there is a big program called Global Gateway, where we support mobilize funds for big investments. And the EU has mobilized over 700 million already, with a view to projects like the North-South Corridor, the electricity connection with Georgia. So these are tangible ways where we could connect, and we expect to do even much more in the coming years. The second is by supporting something that it's very close to our heart and what is the EU, which is supporting resilience and reforms. And there we want to commend Armenians for their courageous steps towards the EU. And we have in that regard increased a lot of our bilateral support, including to Karabakh Armenians, for example, or supporting over 6,000 SMEs in the past year. This is something that gets very close to people, help them in the realities of the day, but also something very close to people. We will be launching the dialogue with a view to one day have visa liberalization, so that one day Armenian tourists can travel freely to the EU. And then again, it's something very, very tangible. And third and final point, it's security. We're talking of soft power, but also getting more and more security focus, and there a more stable Armenia means a more stable region. And as some of you know, 2 years ago we launched this EU mission in Armenia that has been helping to monitor the Armenia-Azerbaijan border. I think they're playing a superb job. I had the opportunity to visit them yesterday, and this is kind of the things we're trying to do with Armenia, but also through something we call the European Peace Facility. We have been helping to modernize the Armenian armed forces and to rapid all this into a more joint vision of security. We will soon be having a security and defense consultations in Armenia. All this with a view to support Armenia reform agenda, but also to help them in their efforts to finalization of the normalization process with Azerbaijan that the Prime Minister was mentioned today. The High Representative Kallas couldn't be here today, but she's coming to Armenia before end of June, early July, and I'm sure she will take all this forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this quite structured and informative take. If I turn my attention now to Mark Kuls, and from the Council of Europe's perspective, if you could comment on some of the actions that the Council has been taking to support consolidation of democracy and democratic institutions in Eastern neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm not sure that each participant knows the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is the oldest European organization, founded in 1984 to defend democracy, rule of law, and human rights. So it's different of the European Union. We work together, but it's two different organizations. Council of Europe's support to Armenia has been steady since 2001. It's when Armenia became a member of the Council of Europe. 4 consecutive Council of Europe's action plans have been adopted since 2012 to bolster Armenian efforts towards democratic reforms in line with Council of Europe standards. That's very important. And to give you two concrete examples at local level, with our Center of Expertise, we have done it in Armenia, but also in Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. We have been supporting consultative, participatory, and deliberative democracy initiatives to engage citizens in dialogue and co-creation of policy. And another example is our participation to the elaboration of the concept of a new local reform in this country. The concept of new decentralization was adopted by Armenia in 2023, and now there is a draft law on local self-government. I know that this draft law is still in discussion with local authorities, but when it will be adopted, it will be a significant step forward in the path towards enhancing local democracy. And I really believe that local democracy is very important for democracy, because democracy is not only the verticality of the power, it's also the share of power.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask Ms. Yuknevichiene about your experiences from European Parliament. Obviously, there is the technical question of how the EU legislative efforts can support these countries. But specifically, when we talk about some security risk and threats, Lithuania has been actually quite outspoken in not just European but global context about some countries such as China or Russia undermining security also of the EU space, Europe. So maybe you have some take from the interactions at the European Parliament.
Yeah, thank you very much. 1-2 minutes and questions about China and all global issues is a little bit difficult, but I will try. I also would like to introduce, as you did very rightly, European Parliament. European Parliament is a very unique institution. And when Armenia joins European Union, you will have members of European Parliament representing your country in European continent. I hope that it will happen in my lifetime. I wish to see this. Around 373 million people are voting. And this is the largest international democratic elections in the world. Now, on the question. Yes, European Union today is facing really new challenges we could not imagine a few years ago. And during last parliamentary elections, security became among the priorities, among the voters. Number one in my country, Lithuania, number two, number three, maybe less in Italy or Spain, but nevertheless, among priorities. And today, security and defense is one of our biggest challenges. This is why we, of course, in the light of situation in Washington, D.C., in NATO itself, of course, the most important challenge is the war in the European continent, and all those actors, they are involved. It's not like some speakers before in the first minutes of this conference mentioned Russia's Ukraine conflict. No, it is not Russia's Ukraine conflict. It's much more. We Europeans, we are on board. We in Lithuania, we feel the same threat as Ukrainians. We Lithuanians, we understand that Ukrainians today are defending us, European continent. And the European Union understands this. That's why we are trying now to change, to go forward with our institution like European Union, and to start to build up our defense union, of course in cooperation with NATO, of course not duplicating, of course we would like to have the United States on board, but we understand the situation will be different. So now on enlargement also is one of the priorities, and this time enlargement process is very much about security. It's not only about economy, it's not only about welfare, of course it's about spreading of democracy, because it's our interest, deepest interest in European Union member states to have this continent composed with democratic nations, because democracies, I don't know any example when democracies are launching a war against each other. Usually autocracies, dictatorships are attacking or each other or mostly against democracies, like we have now. So enlargement became most of important challenges. And following what my colleague from Armenian Parliament just mentioned, I would like to underline importance of 2022, when this large-scale war was launched. European Union immediately changed understanding on Eastern Partnership countries. You know that Ukraine became a candidate country, also Moldova, Georgia. Unfortunately, my beloved Georgians, I congratulate all Georgians. They are here with their Independence Day of today, but unfortunately the developments are not in progress on EU, softly saying, but what I wanted to say, that it changed a lot 2022, and many politicians, many capitals understood that this naive approach towards Kremlin, which existed until 22, when many expected that engagement policy with Kremlin will be helpful for both sides, it failed. And today it's very understandable that those gray zones left in between dictatorship and democracies, it also was one of the reasons why Putin launched this war, thinking that democracies are weak and he will grab countries next to them. So Armenian, just one final message for this part. Armenia for me is very close to me as Lithuanian, because we are a small nation, because we became real Lithuania when we joined NATO and EU, despite our very sad history in the past. So those changes we hear from this capital, I think, is encouraging, and Armenia is becoming like one of the leaders of democratic processes in this region. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure our Armenian colleagues appreciate this support. Although we speak about security overtaking now the agenda, the theme of this obviously dialogue is also navigating the unknown, which relates also to economic sphere. If we like it or not, we see different interventions from the United States as well. And I would ask now my colleague on the right, State Secretary from Slovenia, Marko Štucin, perhaps to comment on some of the economic opportunities in light of this unknown for the region, for the countries of Eastern Neighborhood, but maybe also opportunities for Slovenia specifically in consideration with what's taking place.
Thank you very much. Now, when it comes to the Eastern Partnership, we heard before it was established in 2009. That was a year after the wars in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, if you probably remember. And I remember it very well because as a young diplomat in 2008, one of my first jobs was to task the strategy for Eastern Partnership. Slovenia was presiding the European Union in 2008, so we didn't have external action service at that time, so it was on the member states to put forward the proposals that were then negotiated in Brussels, and I put a small piece of my ideas into this. Reflecting now from today's perspective, the idea was to basically establish the political and economic mechanisms for cooperation with these countries, and I'm specifically not mentioning security because security, in our view, comes afterwards. So if you know how European Union was established, so on the basis of economic cooperation, then political cooperation, then comes peace, stability, security. So we wanted to copy this also for this region. Now it's clear today the Eastern Partnership needs to be upgraded. Out of 6 countries, of course, Ukraine is in the war. Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, they're candidate countries. We have Armenia with European aspirations, Azerbaijan, and then Belarus, who is actually, in partnership with Russian Federation in war in Ukraine. So there are many factors that change completely the perspective of the Eastern Partnership that was established. But if you ask, and I'll answer concretely, so what is the economic, what are the economic possibilities? Well, the main one is to connect those countries with the second biggest economy in the world, being European Union. That's the main one. So you need a form of cooperation in order to do so. And I'll not go into details because there are many specific areas, but being able to have better access to the second biggest economic bloc is something huge. The second very important thing is connectivity, was already mentioned. Armenia, for example, is actually in the middle of the way from China to Europe, so we have a central corridor that can go through, and this is something that can bring extremely big value for this country, I personally believe. And when you ask where the Slovenian position is, economically, we would be, if you go from China to, if the goods would go from China to Europe, we would be at the end of this path. So we have a big port of Koper, that would be the end of this central corridor road, and it's in our strong national interest, also not only European, but speaking as European, it's for sure goes hand in hand, but it's in our big interest to really enable Armenia, but also the whole region, to cooperate better, to work better together, to enable better economic cooperation, and then actually better work with the European Union as such. With this, it comes also safety and security. That's our firm belief.
Thank you very much. One of the areas I think that is universal and unchanged is our necessity to build resilience in the sphere of cyber and in terms of hybrid security. I would like to ask His Excellency Lucian Fatou, who represents the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center, whether he has any remarks that would relate to Eastern neighborhood countries, how they can adapt to these potential threats coming in this sphere, and perhaps build longer-term resilience.
Thank you very much. It's my honor and pleasure to attend this forum, and I congratulate the organizers for establishing already a place for strategic thinking and providing solid policy options. I represent a center, an institution that is a little bit younger than the Council of Europe. We were founded in 2021. At the same time, we come on a need, following a need that the Romanian government identified in addressing the issue of resilience from a conceptual point of view. So our center deals with resilience from a conceptual point of view, deals with studies, analysis, training, exercises, and dialogue with partners on resilience-related issues. In our dialogue with partners, we do not preach, we do not teach, we listen to the needs of the partners we engage with, and at the same time we learn from the countries who are experiencing resilience in direct way, and I could even say in hard way. I would like to quote now the 2024 Flash Eurobarometer, who identified two as the most potential threats to democracy. One is the citizens' lack of confidence and skepticism towards democratic institutions, and the second is online and offline dissemination of false and or misleading information. At the same time, 82% of Europeans agree that distorted or outright fake information are a clear and present threat to democracy. The Secretary General of the European External Action Service definitely can speak more documented way about this. But starting from these perspectives, our center looks at the hybrid threats from a multidisciplinary perspective. We look not only at information, disinformation, and need to develop critical thinking at a very early age, but also at hybrid threats to critical infrastructure and to democratic functioning of a state. From this perspective, we developed a number of programs within the Euro-Atlantic family, but also with the neighboring countries of the European Union, specifically Moldova and Ukraine. A number of programs are developed. I have a 2-hour presentation here, which I decided to skip. And the reason I'm here with my colleagues is that we want to explore the possibilities of engaging with Armenia on specific topics related to resilience, including in preventing hybrid threats, where the center can provide the expertise of our colleagues and other institutions involved in Romania, and also learn and improve our database with the threats that you encounter. And again, this is something that we attach great importance also at the EU level. In 2020, the European Democracy Action Plan was adopted, the Defense for Democracy package in 2023, and the regulation on political advertising transparency in 2024. So these are some programs and some legislation and some concrete activities that the EU is trying to codify specific actions in support of preventing hybrid threats to our civic and material infrastructure, to safeguarding democracy from the threats of interference.
Thank you so much. I feel very bad because I gave the first speaker so much pressure to speak within a minute or two, that he was really rushing through the remarks. So I really want to end on good terms in the country that I'm visiting. And I would like to ask Mr. Yerevyan whether first he has actually some responses to what he's heard from the speakers before I can ask any other questions. I think it would be nice to give him a chance to react.
I have a reflection upon one of the questions that you posed about the development of democratic institutions and security threats. So it sounded to me as if we should make a trade-off between them, as if democracy and security are mutually exclusive. I felt that there is such a context in your question, but I believe that it's quite the opposite. Democracy is a security. Maybe it's not visible in the short run, but for the statehood, for the institutional development, democracy is the security. Democracy brings security, and the example of Armenia is there in terms of institutional development. If we didn't have democracy 3, 4, 5 years ago, after the war, our statehood would be damaged. If we couldn't work through democratic institutions, if it was upon 1%, 2%, 3% to decide what we can do, we would be in very difficult situation. It is the understanding by each citizen that future is dependent on him. He's a decision maker, makes society more resilient towards the foreign negative influence, because then the foreign forces, those who try to undermine your institution, should work with each and every citizen. And this is where we come to the remark by the colleague about the second most popular threat, so dissemination of disinformation via media outlets, etc., etc. This is where certain forces should, and this is why they do this, because in democratic societies they should work with each and every citizen, not only just one person who is in charge. And here I think that we have a great success, and we're going to develop this success.
Thank you so much. It seems like you're reading my mind as well, because my question was related a bit to voters. As somebody who experienced the interactions with EU since 90s and then became a member state through a very heavy enlargement process, I always get frustrated when I go to Brussels or in my country of origin, because the people that are often forgotten are the voters, sometimes the common people and the young people. We often have dialogue how to make this happen, that, let's say, institutions in Brussels connect with the public, but it actually lies in the hands of the national governments. So it's good to hear you understand this importance. How do you feel in maybe your future elections that are coming up, what challenges you will have to overcome to get the trust and support from all of these groups that you mentioned to overcome all these security and perhaps also economic issues?
Yeah, we face nearly the same challenges as all the other democracies around the world. We have seen the result of recent elections in number of European states. And we also have seen the malign foreign interferences to these elections. And in Armenia as well, we already see some signs of this kind of interference. We already see that. And we expect, we anticipate that it is going to grow by time when the day of election comes closer. And what we do with this, we talk to our people. Today in the morning, the Prime Minister was addressing these issues for about half an hour, and he's doing this nearly every day. And we in the Parliament are doing the same, trying to explain the aims of the policies that we're implementing, the reason that we're trying to do this, the possible outcomes, and of course, in the short run, we're also talking about this misinformation, disinformation campaigns, very often consisting of deep fakes, which is, I should admit, is quite challenging. But we try to do this. We try to explain to our people to not to believe just to everything that they see, especially in social networks. We try to explain that even videos, even photos, even voices can be faked. So, and I think that we have, though very modest, but we have some success there, and I do not see it any other way. I cannot imagine limitations in our media. I cannot imagine that. This year, according to the report of the Reporters Without Borders organization, independent organization, Armenia is on the 34th place worldwide by its media freedom. It's unprecedented. We have never been on that high line in this ranking. We are, I would say, somewhere in between in some EU member states and some others, somewhere in between. And it's I think it's a good news, and it's an achievement, and we should protect this freedom rather than limit it.
Thank you. You actually have a very good score for internet freedom. I was looking at it, it's 70 out of 100 points. That's even higher. Let's even boost this. And like you said, it's a country in transition, so it's in a good path to get that boost and support. But I'm going to ask now, which is quite relevant to this conversation, Mark Coles, if you don't mind, from the perspective of Council of Europe, how do you, seeing these efforts of Armenia to strengthen their democratic institutions, how do you assess the progress of a country, in this area of democratic transition? From your perspective, what it is that you're looking at and what it is that they have to pay attention to more?
First, I also believe that democracy brings security. In an age of uncertainty, the best way to ensure stability and security is not to retreat from democratic principles, but to anchor them more firmly, locally, nationally, and internationally. And it's the case of Armenia. A lot of reforms have been done in this country the last years, and it's really appreciated by the Council of Europe. The president of the parliamentary of the Council of Europe was here a few weeks or a few months ago. I believe that in a few weeks the General Secretary of the Council of Europe will also come here in Armenia. I talked a few minutes ago over the reform on local democracy. That's very important. To give an example, Armenia became member of the Council of Europe in 2001, but ratified very fast, very rapidly in 2002 the European Charter on Local Self-Government. And regularly we have a delegation of the Congress who come in each European countries to follow the application of the Charter. The late time was in 2019, and we will do a new monitoring next year. But what we see at local level, it's a very positive evaluation on participation, on good dialogue between local authorities and government on an example. And it's not easy, the geographical situation of Armenia, and in this context, I think it does a lot of things. And I also agree over the problem of the foreign influence. At its March 2025 session, the Congress addressed the issue of foreign interference in local and regional elections, calling on local, regional and national authorities to adopt a comprehensive and multi-layered strategy to address this growing threat. That's also something that Georgia must be cautioned, as the problem on each European countries and over the world of the fake news. Well, there is still a work to do, but a work that must do in each European countries. But I really think that Armenia is a good way in its democratic reforms.
Thank you. That's so important to hear. We heard in the first part about over 500 applications from young leaders to participate in the program here. So I would like to dedicate a little time to give these young people a chance to ask questions. If there is any with ready questions, if you could please give them a microphone and introduce yourselves, and don't make this a statement, please just ask a question or two. Is there any young leader here? We have a microphone ready. Let's try to ask 2 or 3 questions, and specifically if you have a speaker that would like to answer.
Okay, thank you.
You need to stand up, please.
Okay, I want to thank the speakers for the insightful words. So my question is very simple. I want to know, how might the peace agreement announced by the Prime Minister and the potential stability it brings impact on future relations between the EU and Armenia? Could Armenia evolve from a mere neighbor to a potential candidate? And hopefully maybe Mr. Aman Yegoyan can say a few words, and Mrs. Belen Martinez-Carbonell. Thank you.
Let's see if we have another question or two.
Yes, also thank you very much to all the speakers. I think it's a fascinating panel. I was thinking about foreign information manipulation when resilience was brought up, and I was thinking about the case of Moldova, where we have seen the EU offer its expertise in foreign information manipulation in the local context of the Moldovan presidential elections, and now in the upcoming parliamentary elections as well. And I was wondering, especially to Ms. Carbonell, but also to Mr. Yegoyan, to what extent is this a model that could be used and would be welcomed maybe in Armenia as well, or throughout the Eastern Partnership?
And maybe one final, unless...
My name is Dina Munir. I'm from Egypt. I'm associate professor at the American University in Cairo. Thank you for the interesting presentation. And I have a question regarding the EU foreign policy. In your perspective, how far the EU foreign policy strikes a balance between adopting bilateral cooperation agreements and adopting cohesive and consistent regional policy framework? It's heavily criticized that the EU, when deploying such a kind kind of collaborative agreements, particularly with countries that lack democratic values and sustainable governance systems. This leads to further consolidating the autocratic regimes. So how far the EU policy, foreign policy strikes a balance between bilateral agreements and also consolidating the values of democracy and sustainable governance in its eastern and southern neighborhood countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for these questions. I'll start with Secretary General Carbonell, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all. They are very three and very smart questions. The first on the Armenian aspirations. We are very honored for the Armenian people interested in joining the EU, and we've seen this adoption of the EU bill, which is an important step to the extent that it translates a political agenda of this country and an expression of interest. But the EU accession process is a very long and rigorous process, which starts with a formal application, and then it has a number of phases, and at every single step, the country is judged on a merit-based. So, I mean, accession requires then the unanimous support of all EU member states. Some of them are here in the room, but I'm just to say that we're very honored and we hear the call of and the will of the Armenian people, but the accession is a very, very long road ahead that of course, in the meantime, there are many ways to bring Armenia closer to the EU through promotion of reforms, but that's what I would say on that. Then, if I may, there was another question regarding the support we've given to Moldova ahead of elections and whether this is something that we could replicate in other countries. And yes, of course, and this is subject of the conversations we are having at the moment with Armenia. And I think if that was the wish of the authorities, we could, of course, also support them ahead of the elections. And then I feel I'm a bit monopolizing, but if you want, I'm happy to draw on the third question.
I think you should just answer the third and then we'll move on.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Thank you.
On the third question from the youth representative from Egypt, I think that everything is complementary, and the fact that we continue and engage with countries where the democratic and rule of law and human rights standards might not be at the same level as we would wish is only a way to promote and further, and engaging with those authorities in a positive or constructive road can only help all of us to promote precisely those standards, rather than these engagement would only have a more negative effect. So maybe that's the short answer to it.
Thank you. If I can ask Mr. Yerevyan to respond to these questions.
With pleasure. I will start with the third question, and I should disagree with my colleague, Ms. Secretary General. I completely agree with our colleague from Egypt that without conditionalities, which are strictly observed, these kind of agreements, they enforce the dictatorships. They enforce them, actually, and we have seen this, including in the framework of its Eastern Partnership. And I think that, as I said in my previous remark, that European Union normative power has reached its limitations. I do not believe that it's possible anymore to impose any kind of normative changes via normative rules, via example, via explaining, via convincing. I do not believe this anymore because I know very well some of those countries that EU tries to change, and I believe that changes in those kind of countries come through specific tools, through tools that work in that kind of countries, which are mostly economic tools, some very strictly observed conditionalities, and so on. And I hope that the EU will do this. As for the agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan as a prerequisite or as a positive steps towards the EU-Armenia relations or the candidacy, again, as I said, it would be very dangerous to link these two issues, because then it will appear that not only changes do not happen in certain countries, but also that they acquire leverages on bilateral relations of EU with a third country. I wouldn't link these two issues. EU-Armenia relations should develop as they develop. Of course, if there is a peace treaty, it will contribute to the development, but we shouldn't put it as a conditionality, because it will mean to give a leverage to Azerbaijan to leverage on EU-Armenia relations or EU third country relations, which is unacceptable. As for the disinformation campaign, since it's quite a new phenomenon, honestly, I do not have ready-made recipes for this. My recipe for fighting against disinformation is to give information. This is the only recipe that I have so far. If there are more sophisticated tools that are used in the EU or are under elaboration, we would happily adopt these tools here. Thanks.
Although we're running out of time, I was told yesterday we can steal a few minutes, but that means quick responses. So I have Mr. Coles and then followed by Ms. Yuknevichiene.
Yes, thank you. I have observed local elections in Moldova, and I was rapporteur for local democracy from 2018-2023, and I see really the foreign influence, or the tentative of foreign influence. They finance Russian, some candidates in Moldova, must be clear. But the foreign influence is not only in East European countries, it's sometimes also in Western European countries. And that's a reality we must fight against, and we must be cautious in each country and also in this country.
Thank you, Ms. Yuknevichiene.
On the first, as I understood, if I was correctly understood about Pashinyan's initiatives and EU-Armenia relations in the future, so of course we, especially in European Parliament, I can speak on behalf of European Parliament, because several times we adopted several resolutions, one of them 24 March, where it was very clear message to Armenian people that European Parliament welcomes the fact that Armenia has strongly emphasized its desire to enhance and prioritize relations with the European Union. It's very important. And, you know, on reforms, from my own experience, my country's experience, it's not because EU wants reforms. Reforms are not for EU. Some people say bureaucrats or Brussels. No, not at all. Reforms, it's for your people. You need reforms because to reform the country and for better lives, for better democratic environment. My country enjoys this very much. Today, we are leading among all countries, new so-called newcomers, except Slovenia and Czech Republic. We overcome all other on GDP, and even countries like Greece, Portugal, and other countries on growth of GDP. And more than 80% of people enjoying this in Lithuania. And not because that EU did something, we did that together with EU. Moldova, just one sentence, yes, I agree with my colleagues, also visited a month ago this country and several times. But, you know, we have to learn a lot from each other. Moldova became like a laboratory, I would say, for Russia. They are using all possible instruments and tools to change the direction of this country. And not only countries next to EU, Romania, my country, all countries, we have the same challenges. Why it's important to look to each other? Then we know the instruments Kremlin is using, and we can recognize them and fight better. So my final message is good luck, Armenia, and we are together with you.
Thank you. I just need to be fair on the last two speakers because they haven't had a chance to respond, but within a minute, if I can just finally ask Mr. Stutzin and Mr. Fatou if they want to make their final remarks.
Gladly, yeah, I'll try to be really fast. I'll respond to the question about the European foreign policy. Never be too idealistic about the foreign policy of anybody. That's my advice, including European foreign policy. It's always about the interests, but there is a difference between short-term interests or long-term interests. In our interest, in the interest of European Union, is to build a neighborhood that will be safe and stable and will also prosper. So basically we want to export what we learned from our experiences, from our integration. We also want to actually not really export, that's not a good word, but promote this in our neighborhood. So this is why European Union foreign policy may not be ideal, but it's, believe me, it does have this idea of that democracy brings stability, brings security, and that it works.
A big pressure on His Excellency Fatou to finalize with big, bold statements.
Thank you. A couple of points. One, about our activities in dialogue with the Republic of Moldova. We have a number of programs on request, suggestion by the Moldovan authorities, central government or local authorities, and we worked a lot on building resilience, critical thinking, and education at the earliest stages in terms of selecting information and understanding the difference between hybrid and genuine information. But this is an issue that has to go further into the social media spheres where a lot of people live in the bubble, and news circulated in that bubble more or less tend to recycle the same ideas. And the second, it's maybe a little bit more of a general discussion about Moldova, applies to Romania as well, maybe to other countries. Pressures on democracy, pressure on democratic elections come not only in black and white, do you look east or do you look west? But there is an additional trend that goes throughout Europe, and there is a certain dissatisfaction against the so-called system, the establishment. So governments need to look at a better communication so that the genuine, the legitimate expectation of citizens for better governance, for better public policies, is not distorted and is not sidetracked to a binary option between East and West. And this is an issue that goes beyond the technical ability of the center I'm representing, but I'm speaking as a voter and as a European taxpayer. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, fellow participants and speakers, Shnura Galutsiun Polorin, thank you everybody, but also to the organizers, Observer Research Foundation, Samir Saran, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Armenia. I couldn't finalize it better than our fellow speakers in terms of turning the focus back to member states and governments and local people to reassure themselves what they really want out of this engagement and put the work in practice in terms of making their institutions more resilient and stable. So thank you, and I believe we have lunch coming up, so that's the positive also of this panel, that we no longer stand between you and lunch.